After years of a seemingly happy marriage, Lisa, my wife, dropped a bombshell. It all started one quiet evening when we were having a casual dinner at home. She nervously pushed around her food, and I noticed she was lost in thought. Eventually, she blurted out the words that changed everything. "I think we should have an open relationship." My heart sank. We had always been a monogamous couple, committed to each other. I tried to understand where she was coming from. Lisa explained that she felt unfulfilled and wanted to explore things outside our marriage. At first, I was confused and angry, but she reassured me that it wasn't about me. It was about her desire for freedom and growth. She said she loved me but wanted to explore her sexual and emotional needs with others. After days of internal conflict, I reluctantly agreed. I thought perhaps it was just a phase for her and that we would find a way to make it work. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Over the following months, Lisa started going out more frequently, meeting new people, and openly sleeping with them. Each time she came home, she would share the details, sometimes with excitement, sometimes with regret. The most painful part was her lack of guilt. In fact, she seemed empowered by the idea of being with others. At first, I tried to hold on to our connection, seeking reassurance that our bond was still strong. But as I watched her drift further away, I started to feel neglected. Eventually, I found myself seeking comfort in others as well. It wasn't something I had planned, but one night, when I met someone at a bar, the temptation was too strong to resist. The night we spent together felt exhilarating. For the first time in a while, I felt alive, desired, and seen. I didn't feel guilty, but I did feel conflicted. When I returned home, I tried to push it out of my mind, telling myself it was part of the agreement. But when I saw Lisa the next day, something in her eyes had changed. It was as if the reality of the open relationship had finally hit her. She had seen me with another woman, the same woman who she once claimed to trust, and who had now crossed a line that she had been the first to suggest. The jealousy that she had pushed aside for so long resurfaced. "You slept with someone else?" she asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Her tone was sharp, and it struck me like a slap in the face. "You told me you were okay with this. You said we'd share the freedom." "I thought I was," I replied, though I couldn't deny the hurt behind my words. "But I guess I'm not as okay with it as I thought." In the weeks that followed, Lisa's feelings shifted drastically. The sense of empowerment she once claimed to feel quickly morphed into insecurity and regret. The more she tried to embrace the open relationship, the more she realized she wasn't built for it. The constant emotional roller coaster left her drained, and the joy of exploring new connections had faded into feelings of loneliness and jealousy. One night, as we sat on the couch together, she turned to me and whispered, "I regret suggesting this. I thought it would make things better, but it's tearing me apart." The pain in her eyes mirrored my own. I had no answers for her. We had both stepped into territory neither of us understood, and now we were left with the aftermath of our choices. We both realized that the open relationship wasn't a solution. It was a wedge that slowly but surely had driven us apart. Despite her initial request, it was me, the one who had hesitated, who had felt the deeper sense of loss. The reality of being with other people hadn't healed what was broken. It only exposed more cracks in our connection. In the end, we both decided it was time to end the experiment. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but we had been better when we were just us. As we both took time to reflect on the chaos we had created, we acknowledged that some things, like trust and intimacy, were too precious to share with anyone else. It wasn't easy, but we learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the idea of having more can make you realize how much you truly need what you already have. After we made the decision to end the experiment, things were anything but simple. There was a palpable tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that we couldn't just go back to the way things were. We had changed, both of us in ways that we hadn't anticipated. The damage wasn't just from the infidelity or the open relationship itself, but from the deep fractures it had caused in the foundation of our trust. Lisa and I tried to talk things through, but the conversations often felt strained. She'd sometimes become defensive, as if trying to justify her actions, while I would find myself bottling up the anger and hurt, unable to express how deeply I had been affected by her suggestion in the first place. I was angry at myself for going along with it, and even more so for how I had felt when I sought comfort in the arms of another. I never wanted to betray her, but it had been a reaction to the emotional void I felt as she grew distant. It wasn't long before Lisa began questioning everything. She couldn't stop asking herself if she'd ruined something precious, if she'd made a mistake that couldn't be undone. In her vulnerability, I saw the woman I once adored, the woman who used to be my best friend. But now, there was a new layer of complexity to our relationship, one that neither of us knew how to navigate. Weeks passed, and we both tried to rebuild in different ways. Lisa started seeing a therapist, trying to work through her feelings of guilt, her need for validation, and her underlying fears about our relationship. I also sought therapy, though mine was more focused on understanding why I had agreed to something that went against my instincts and what had led me to feel so disconnected from her. The more we talked with our therapists, the more we began to understand the root of our problems. It wasn't just about the open relationship. It was about unmet emotional needs that had festered over time. The thrill of new experiences had momentarily distracted Lisa from confronting the loneliness she had felt in our marriage. And for me, I realized that I had been too passive, avoiding conflict in an attempt to keep the peace, rather than voicing my true feelings before it was too late. But the road to healing wasn't without its bumps. Lisa's regret weighed heavily on her, and the shame she carried made it hard for her to look me in the eyes some days. She would apologize repeatedly, and while I appreciated her remorse, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same. My trust in her had been shattered, and no amount of apologies could fully fix that. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I could ever forgive her, or if I was holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. Was she the woman I married, or had the open relationship revealed a side of her that I couldn't accept? The confusion was overwhelming, and every attempt to move forward seemed to hit a wall. We both made efforts to reconnect. Small gestures of kindness, spending more time together, taking trips to places that once made us happy. But in the back of my mind, there was always a question of whether we could really go back to a place of genuine trust and intimacy. It felt like a tightrope walk, with every misstep threatening to undo all the progress we had made. Then one evening, as we sat on the couch, our hands brushing in a rare moment of quiet, Lisa looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry for asking for the open relationship. I thought it would help, but it only hurt us. I realized that what we had before, just the two of us, was enough. I don't need anyone else." I never did. Her words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in a long while, I truly saw the woman I had married. I could hear the sincerity in her voice and see the vulnerability that had been hidden beneath the surface of her earlier decisions. It wasn't easy to forgive, but in that moment, I realized that we were both just two people, trying to figure out how to navigate the complexities of love and desire. We spent the next few months working through the aftermath of our decisions. There were moments of doubt, of questioning whether we could truly heal, but we made a pact. We would face everything honestly, without the filters that had led us to the mess we had created. Slowly, we found our way back to each other. Not in the same way we had been before, but in a more honest, more raw form of connection. We learned that love is not about being perfect, but about facing the imperfections together. It was not about indulging in fantasies, but about accepting the reality of what we had. Lisa and I found a new understanding of what it meant to be partners, no longer chasing an idealized version of freedom or excitement, but grounded in a love that was real, sometimes messy, but ultimately ours. And as time passed, the weight of the past began to lessen, not because it was forgotten, but because we had chosen to learn from it, to grow together rather than apart. I could never forget the pain of what we had gone through, but I had also come to realize that what mattered most was a commitment to each other we had renewed. Months passed, and while the scars from our past remained, there was a newfound strength in our relationship. Lisa and I began to rebuild, though we both knew it was going to be a long and delicate journey. Trust, once shattered, could not be repaired overnight, but we were determined to put in the work, to face our fears and doubts, no matter how uncomfortable it was. Our therapist played a crucial role in guiding us through these difficult conversations. Lisa had to confront the underlying reasons behind her desire for an open relationship in the first place. Her feelings of insecurity, her struggles with intimacy, and her fear that we were growing apart. It was painful to listen to, but it also helped me understand her choices better. It wasn't about me not being enough. It was about her own fears and her misplaced way of trying to fill a void she didn't know how to address. For me, it was about understanding my own role in all of this. I had been passive, too afraid to voice my feelings, and too unwilling to confront the problems we had before the open relationship even became a possibility. I had buried my own frustrations, telling myself that I was fine, when in reality, I wasn't. I had to learn how to communicate my needs more openly and honestly. The therapy sessions helped me realize that being vulnerable was not a sign of weakness, but a way to strengthen our bond. There were days when the weight of our history felt heavy. The jealousy, the fear of betrayal, the anxiety. It wasn't easy to push all of that aside. Some nights, I still lay awake, wondering if I could ever fully trust Lisa again. But each day, we took small steps forward. We made more time for each other. Dates, walks in the park, even sitting together in silence. We found comfort in the quiet moments, rebuilding our connection slowly, brick by brick. Lisa, too, had moments of doubt. She wondered if she could ever truly erase the guilt she felt for pushing us to the point where our bond had almost broken. She often apologized, but I reassured her that I wasn't holding on to resentment, even though, at times, it was hard not to. I needed her to understand that forgiveness wasn't a one-time act. It was a daily choice, one that required effort from both of us. We both had to let go of expectations, of who we thought we should be as a couple, and of the idealized versions of each other that had existed in our minds before all of this chaos. We had to embrace the reality of who we were now, with all our flaws, insecurities, and past mistakes. We were two people trying to heal, trying to love each other with a deeper, more honest connection. And yet, we also learned that it wasn't just about fixing the past. It was about creating a new future together. We started making new memories, ones that didn't involve the pain or confusion of the open relationship. Lisa and I went on a trip to the mountains, just the two of us. We spent the weekend hiking, laughing, and rediscovering what we had once shared, before everything had fallen apart. It wasn't the grand gesture that healed us, but the quiet, everyday moments of connection, of shared experiences that weren't clouded by betrayal. One night, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Lisa took my hand in hers. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know I want to face it with you. I've learned that love isn't about getting everything you want. It's about building something real, even when it's messy. I don't want anyone else. I want you. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I squeezed her hand. I feel the same way. I've learned that the most important thing is being with someone who makes you feel like home. I don't need perfection. I just need you. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was enough. The open relationship had been a mistake, a misguided attempt at solving problems that had been there long before we ever discussed it. But in the end, it had forced us to face our own issues, to confront the parts of ourselves that had been neglected. It had taught us that love, at its core, is not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together, no matter how messy they are. As we continued to move forward, we both knew that there would be challenges ahead. Trust would take time to rebuild completely, and we would have to continue working on our communication, our vulnerabilities, and our desires. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. We weren't perfect, but we were stronger. Stronger because we had fought for each other, even when it felt like we were losing everything. The experience had forever changed us, but it had also brought us closer in ways that I hadn't expected. We were no longer the couple who thought love was about perfection or about controlling each other's desires. We had learned that real love is messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it is worth fighting for, especially when you're willing to grow and evolve together.